This is one of the most exciting finds in archaeology, and it's one that has been suppressed by some of the biggest names in the field. It's not some crazy conspiracy either. They just don't want to admit how wrong they were. That's because this artifact proves that there was electricity 2,000 years ago. Not lightning, mind you, but actual electricity that people used every day for fun and profit. And the worst part is that history will probably never know who invented electricity first. There are hundreds of unexplained artifacts that have been found all around the world showing that many different cultures had access to technology we don't think they should have had. Most archaeologists just assume these items were created much later and then lost during the Dark Ages. But this assumption doesn't always hold up under scrutiny. And it has become more and more difficult to argue against these items being proof of lost technology. The fact is that there are probably many different inventors all around the world who came up with the same inventions at roughly the same time. This would make sense as the human brain can only come up with so many unique solutions to everyday problems. What makes this find so interesting is that we actually have several examples of these devices still intact. We've shown you the Baghdad battery before. But let us take another look at it since it's impossible to talk about early electricity without mentioning it. This is the oldest known battery in the world. And it is also one of the greatest archaeological mysteries. It looks like a clay pot with a copper tube stuck inside of it. The pot itself has an opening on the side and a solid lid, while the copper tube has a hole drilled into it. The two are connected through the hole in the clay pot, which is where things get really weird. You see, if you put a charge in the system by putting a copper coin into the pot, it becomes a voltaic cell, aka a simple battery. You need three main components to make a battery: a negative terminal, a positive terminal, and an electrolyte. Electrolytes are usually acids or bases that allow electricity to flow freely through them. Back in the 19th century, scientists discovered this by accident when they were trying to build electromagnets. They ended up creating batteries instead, and thus the science of electricity was born. To complete a circuit, all you have to do is connect the negative terminal to the positive terminal with a wire. When you add an electrolyte to this mix, electrons can move from the negative to the positive terminal through the liquid. When this happens, a chemical reaction takes place that creates energy. We can measure this energy as voltage, which is the amount of electrical pressure pushing through a circuit. Voltage is measured in volts. Going back to our Baghdad battery, it is likely that the copper tube acted as the positive terminal, while the copper coin acted as the negative terminal. The electrolyte would have been added by placing an iron rod into the clay pot. Iron is reactive, meaning that it will rust. This means that it could have acted as a catalyst to facilitate the transfer of electrons from the negative to the positive terminal. The acidic electrolyte allowed electricity to pass from the negative terminal to the positive terminal. Then once the electrons reached the positive terminal, they would be absorbed by the iron rod, causing it to rust. So far, so good. Now, what could the ancient Mesopotamians have powered with their primitive batteries? Well, according to some experts, they may have been used to plate small metal objects with gold. They may have also been used to create electromagnets, which could have been used in rudimentary electric motors. In fact, if you had enough of these batteries, you could hook them up in series to increase the voltage. If you had a large enough number of them, you could use them to power simple machines like electromagnets and electric motors. Unfortunately, no one knows exactly how many batteries would have been needed to power such devices. Also, the electrolytes would have depleted over time, meaning that you couldn't just leave a device running overnight. Still, it shows us that the Mesopotamians were well versed in practical science, and they understood how to harness the power of chemistry to create energy. What makes this find even more incredible is that it was discovered by accident. A farmer stumbled across the site in 1936 and sold the artifacts to an antique dealer. It wasn't until much later that it was realized that the farmer had just uncovered a treasure trove of history. Over 100 similar artifacts have been found throughout Iraq, but none of them are as intriguing as the original. It's important to note that some people deny that these were actual batteries. Instead, they say that they were just jars for holding scrolls. However, this theory doesn't hold up to scrutiny. The vast majority of these artifacts were found in areas where people wouldn't have kept their scrolls, such as in tombs. Plus, the way they're constructed makes it impossible for them to keep scrolls upright. They also have an odd umbilical cord attached to them, which is definitely not something you'd find on a jar meant for holding scrolls. What's interesting is that we know very little about how ancient Mesopotamia came up with these designs. It's possible that they independently discovered the principles behind batteries. Or they may have been gifted to them by a more advanced culture. Either way, we have yet to find any other evidence of this. And it seems that the Mesopotamians lost their knowledge sometime after the Roman Empire fell. If you ask mainstream archaeologists, the Baghdad battery was likely a fluke. After all, the Romans spread their influence throughout Mesopotamia, and it's possible that they brought their scientific knowledge with them. According to them, the Romans likely experimented with simple batteries, and it's entirely possible that someone from that era made the Baghdad battery by accident. But this raises another question. If it was that easy, why didn't they intentionally create batteries? It is obvious that the Romans were smart enough to understand that the copper pots could be turned into an energy source. But we have no records of them ever creating a battery. Instead, they preferred to rely on slave labor to generate power. Perhaps they thought that electricity was worth the effort, or that it simply was powerful enough to justify its construction. Whatever the case, the truth is that we have no idea how the Baghdad battery was discovered or how the Mesopotamians came up with the design. It's also unclear if they built more than just batteries, although some of the other artifacts lend credence to this idea. Take, for example, the Iraqi sphere. This is a strange metallic object that was discovered in 1897. It is perfectly round and almost looks like a children's toy. It's also magnetic, leading some to believe that it's hollowed out inside. The problem with this theory is that there are no seams on the outside, so there's no way of knowing if it's hollow without destroying it. One thing is for certain, though. It's not a ball bearing, since it dates back thousands of years before ball bearings were invented. There are also hundreds of other strange artifacts that have been found in the area, including a mysterious disc that looks like it could have been used as a storage device. Sadly, these devices are often overlooked and dismissed as nothing more than interesting pieces of junk. Some people have even claimed that they were manufactured much later and then buried in the ground, on purpose to confuse archaeologists. While this is certainly possible, it's also highly unlikely. The chances of so many people conspiring to pull off such a hoax are astronomical. Besides, why would they go through the trouble of burying advanced devices that were made thousands of years later? It makes no sense. The truth is that no one really knows what these devices are, which is why they're so controversial. In the end, it's up to you to decide what you think they are. Were the Mesopotamians really experimenting with power long before Edison? Or were they just ordinary people trying to make their lives a little easier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos about ancient technologies that should unexist. Thanks for watching!